Shalom. All praises, blessings, glories, and honors to Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai Bahashem, Racha Kodash. Double honors to my Ella apostles and bishop elders of Great Millstone, who have taught me this truth, as well of men of like mind. Shalom wa chasad, which means peace and mercy, to the elect of the nation of Israel, former you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native American Indians, and Israelite foreigners of the seed line of our forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, whom are scattered here in America, which is Babylon the Great, and abroad. And to you I say Shalom, and Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Ratazah. This lesson is edifying and informative. In the news from the RT, UK doubles down on nuclear plans. London wants domestically produced warheads and next generation submarines by the 2030s. This is another example of a nation planning to beat its plowshares into swords and pruner hooks into spears. And that is to say, take its economic wealth and use them towards the research, development, enhancements / modifications of weapons of mass destruction. In particular, primarily for ICBM nuclear missiles. For plowshares and pruner hooks are instruments of agriculture, whereas swords and spears are instruments of cruelty. Britain intends to build entirely new warheads for the Trident ballistic missiles to be carried by the upcoming Dreadnought-class atomic submarines. The Defense Ministry has revealed the domestic development and production will cost an additional of $9 billion, which is equivalent to 11.6 billion US dollars over the next 5 years. So the UK, among many other countries like North Korea, Iran, China, India, are all taking their economic wealth and using them towards the research, development, and enhancements / modifications of weapons of mass destruction. Again, in particularly for ICBM nuclear missiles. Okay? Because we are in a season of war, according to Ecclesiastes, the 3rd chapter, the 8th verse. So this is the book of Joel chapter 3, verse 9. Proclaim ye this among the Gentiles, among the heathen nations. Prepare war. Prepare for what war? Revelation chapter 11, verse 14 tells us that the second woe is past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly. And so World War II has already passed. And behold, look, the third woe, World War III, cometh quickly. Hence the reason why these nations are being told through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai to prepare war. This is a proclamation among the Gentiles to prepare for war. And what war? The third world woe, which cometh quickly, according to Revelation chapter 11, verse 14. A war that will be fought, according to Isaiah chapter 9, verse 5, with burning and a fuel of fire. Because The nuclear missiles detonate after the chain reaction phenomenon known as fusion and fission. A fire not blown will consume this man's kingdom because a fire is typically created through what is known as a fire triangle, which comprises air, oxygen, and fuel. But a fire not blown will consume this man's kingdom and will be used during the Third World War. And this is why these nations are preparing for war. Not to mention, they will be fighting against our Lord Yahweh Shai, according to the book of 2nd Ezra, the 13th chapter. And they will all fail together. They will all perish together and become nothing but dust and smell of smoke. Wake up the mighty men. Let all the men of war draw near. Draw near where? To the valley of Jehoshaphat, which Jehoshaphat in the Hebrew is Yahweh Shaphat, which means Yahweh's judgment, because that is where the Lord will judge the heathen nations, the Gentiles. It is located in the Arabian Peninsula, in the Middle East, because the Lord Yahweh Shai will be returning from the east. Let them come up, and this is the point. Beat your plowshares into swords, and your prune hooks into spears. Let the weak say, so let the weak nations that had previously possessed nuclear missiles, warheads, let them now boast and say that they are now strong because now they possess these technologies. Now the playing field has been leveled, so to speak. Let the weak say, I am strong. So now let's go back to the article. The ministry report presented to Parliament on Tuesday and made public on Wednesday describes nuclear modernization as a 1 in 2 generations endeavor that will support the construction of industrial infrastructure and the modernization of manufacturing and maintenance capabilities. The British nuclear arsenal has been entirely submarine-based since 1998 and currently revolves around 4 Vanguard-class missile boats carrying Trident II missiles. Parliament green-lit the development and construction of the Dreadnought class in 2016, and the first of the class remains on track to enter service in the early 2030s, according to the report, when the Lord will hasten the days to where these will become in service a lot more sooner than anticipated. Both the new boats and the new warheads for the Tridents are being designed and constructed in the UK and represent some of the most advanced systems ever built. The MOD report claims, and their development is directly supporting tens of thousands of jobs across the country and investing billions of pounds into the UK economy. Also, recall that the US plans on utilizing roughly $1 trillion to boost its military industrial complex in a bill that had been recently passed. To make that happen, however, the MOD will spend an additional £3 billion, which is equivalent to $3.9 billion on a nuclear program over the next 2 years, and another £6 billion, $7.7 billion over the subsequent 3 years. This will include improvements to shipyards at Faslane and Devonport. Other notable earmarks in the defense budget includes £2.5 billion, equivalent to $3.2 billion over the next 10 years to replenish the depleted stockpiles of ammunition, because all that stuff has been sent for the very most part, according to what he had sent over to Ukraine. So obviously they need to stock back up, replenish back up on their depleted stockpiles of various classes. and 400 million pounds, which is equivalent to 516 million US dollars, to repair crumbling barracks and other accommodations. Defense Secretary Ben Wallace, who announced his resignation over the weekend, persisted in plans to bolster the Royal Navy while reducing the number of tanks and troops in the ground forces to the smallest size since the Napoleonic Wars, according to the Times. Unnamed sources within the military have complained that the new blueprint prioritizes the service formerly led by Admiral Sir Tony Radakin, who took over the General Staff in 2021. London has already picked out the names for the new submarines. Dreadnought's sister boats will be called Valiant, Warspite, and King George VI. According to media reports, while the name Dreadnought has a history in the Royal Navy going back to the 1500s, the most famous was the early 20th century battleship based entirely around big guns. Her launch in 1906 triggered a naval arms race with Germany and France. HMS Hims Dreadnought missed all the major battles of the First World War, but entered history books as the only battleship to ever sink a submarine by ramming a German U-boat in March of 1915. Now, the name Dreadnought, let me see what that says. The type of battleship with a primary battle of large blah 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 blah. A heavy overcoat for stormy weather. A type of battleship introduced in the early 20th century, large and faster than its predecessors and equipped entirely with large caliber guns, named after Britain's HMS Dreadnought, which was the first to be completed in 1906. So this concludes the article. In other reports, I warned you about AI, the Terminator director. Now, oftentimes these Edomites have a way of telling people what will happen in the future before it happens through what is known as predictive programming. An example of this is the series The Simpsons, where they would show in codes what they plan on doing for the future in a jestful manner, in an obvious yet ever elusive manner. Okay, it says the Hollywood filmmaker has warned of a nuclear arms race in artificial intelligence. And not just in artificial intelligence, but also literally. Canadian film director James Cameron has said his 1984 sci-fi blockbuster Terminator should have served as a warning about the dangers of AI. And let's not forget that the idea was actually stolen from an Israelite woman. I forgot her name. Anyway, I digress. It says, and that the weaponization of the emerging tech could have disastrous consequences. No shit, Sherlock. Speaking to CTV News for an interview on Tuesday, the award-winning director was asked whether he believes artificial intelligence could someday bring the extinction of humanity. There won't be an extinction of humanity, man. There will be an extinction of the Edomite race after 1,000 years of them serving hardcore slavery under the nation of Israel in the kingdom that will be established upon the earth very soon. But the other races, the other nations, because the word race is from the Latin raza, which means family or lineage. Okay? And the Lord created, according to the book of Genesis, the 10th chapter, 18 nations. These nations include, even as we can see before us in this image, table of nations, the nation of Israel, Edom, the so-called Caucasian race, Elam, the so-called Indians, Ashur, the so-called Assyrians, Aram, the Syrians, Ishmael, the so-called Arabs, Moab, the so-called Chinese, Ammon, the so-called Japanese, Cush, the so-called Ethiopians, Mizraim, or Mortezayim in the Hebrew, the so-called Egyptians, Put, the so-called North Africans, and Canaan, the so-called South Africans, and Gomor, the so-called Turkish people, okay, Magog, so-called Russians, Gog and Magog, the chief prince of Meshach and Tubal. But amongst the Russians, you have Edomites, and you also have Israelites. A lot of Russians are, in fact, Israelites. Okay, Javan, the so-called Greeks, Ashkenaz, so-called German, Tarshish, the so-called Spanish, and Kittim, Cyprus. Okay, and here's your table of nations. Going back to the article, it reads on to say, I absolutely share this concern. I warned you guys in 1984 and you didn't listen, he said, referring to his film Terminator, which revolves around a cybernetic assassin created by an intelligent supercomputer known as Skynet. Cameron went on to warn that the weaponization of AI is the biggest danger, adding, I think that we will get into the equivalent of a nuclear arms race with AI. And if we don't build it, the other guys are for sure going to build it. And so then it'll escalate. In the event artificial intelligence is deployed on the battlefield, computers may move so quickly that humans cannot or can no longer intercede, the director said, arguing such technology would leave no time for peace talks or an armistice. When you're dealing with a potential of it escalating to nuclear warfare, de-escalation is the name of the game. Having that pause, that timeout. But will they do that? The AIs will not. Cameron continued. The famed filmmaker has issued similar warnings in the past, saying that while AI can be pretty great, it could also literally be the end of the world. This guy, he doesn't understand biblical prophecy. Okay, now AI is a part of this man's technology, which is his blessing, which is the sword. Okay, so the thing about these Edomites is that they don't understand. These so-called scholars amongst the Edomites, they don't understand prophecy. They don't understand how things will pan out, for the lack of words, according to biblical prophecy, how the end will come. Okay. Anyway, I'll stop this article here. I will leave it in the Lord's willing description box of this lesson. The point has pretty much been read. So, in concluding, we have another brief headline here from the BBC, which titles Ukraine War. Wheat prices soar after Russia threatens ships. Here's a brief footage. Wheat prices have risen sharply in global markets after Russia said it would treat ships heading for Ukraine ports as potential military targets. Moscow pulled out of a UN deal on Monday that ensured safe passage for grain shipments crossing the Black Sea. For the past 3 nights, Russia has bombarded Ukraine's grain facility in Odessa and other cities. Moscow also warned that from Thursday, any ships going there will be seen as siding with the Kyiv regime. White House spokesman Adam Hodge suggested Russia was planning to hit civilian ships and blame Ukraine. Russia had laid more sea mines in the approaches to Ukraine ports, he said, as part of a coordinated Russian effort to justify attacking civilian ships. Anything to blame Russia. The Kremlin did not immediately respond to the allegation. As a result, the wheat prices on the European Stock Exchange soared by 8.2% on Wednesday from the previous day to 253.75 euros, approximately 220 pounds and 284 US dollars per ton, while corn prices were up 5.4%. U.S. wheat futures jumped 8.5%, their highest daily rise since just after Russia's February 2022 invasion of Ukraine. And best believe that you had insiders that know about this ahead of time, especially insiders in these different massive asset management firms and funds, mutual, whatever have you. Okay, hedge. They all knew ahead of time, and they make money off of it. Okay. I'll conclude reading the article here as well. The point has been made. I will leave the rest in the description box of the lesson, Lord is willing. Abaradazah, this lesson has been edifying and informative. This has been another in the news. Shalom to the elect.